Hello and welcome to the greatest Tamil science channel. I'm your host Vishaka and we're in conversation with Dr. C.K.Nandagopalan. Hello, sir.
Good morning to you, Shaka.
Good morning. So our topic for today is the very basis of life, what really keeps us alive. It is cellular respiration. So, what are we exactly looking at in cellular respiration? Most of us connected to normal respiration, and yes, in a way, it is connected. But cellular respiration is really the key or the very basis of how energy that we get from food is really converted into the energy that we need to live to perform every single function, whether it's a bodily function for just sustaining life, for example, pumping blood by the heart, or if it is something like exercising, something like that. So cellular respiration is that, as I said, the key function that keeps us alive. And it's very fascinating to understand how it plays a role in our everyday life, how it keeps us alive, and what is it that we can actually do to ensure that cellular respiration is done at an optimal level when we are alive. So, sir, just to start from the basic, what is cellular respiration? What is the process that's followed during cellular respiration?
Okay, now if you want to really understand what is cellular respiration, that 24/7 we breathe in and breathe out because we need oxygen to our entire cells. As you know that in some of our programs we have mentioned that we are built with 100 trillion cells as one unit. So these 100 trillion cells, to our calculation, it's about 10 lakh crores. Various organs are built with various types of human cells. You have hearts made out of heart cell, liver is made out of liver cells, skin is made out of skin cell, kidney is made out of nephron cells. It goes on like that. So each and every individual cell, they require oxygen for a specific reason. This is what is called, in a short form, cellular respiration. That means nearly about 100 trillion cells has to be individually supplied oxygen by our oxygenation part of the body, that is our blood. You have the protein component of the RBC, which is called the hemoglobin, which carries oxygen from the lung, retain it with itself, and as the blood goes through the entire body, the oxygen is supplied to each and every cell individually. This is what is cellular respiration.
Okay. So, sir, while we all often hear this word called the currency of the cell. So, could you just describe what is it? What is it that the energy currency is that the cell uses for every function that it performs?
Yeah, energy currency is something called ATP, that is adenosine triphosphate. Now we talk in the ancient science about alchemy, conversion of one component into another. Say conversion of mercury into gold, or conversion of iron into copper, conversion of one material into another material, which is an atomic process by itself. Because if you take mercury, it's there in periodical table as 79, and gold is 80. So the mercury atom and the gold atom, the difference is one proton short.
Right.
So if you can add one proton into all the mercury atoms, then it turns into gold.
Right.
You understand this basic, right? Okay.
Right.
Now, our energy source is glucose through our food and nutrition, right? So glucose has to be supplied to all the cells individually. It is something like you have a kitchen in New Delhi and then supply breakfast, lunch and dinner to the entire 780 crore people around the world. according to their time, breakfast, lunch and dinner. Is it possible?
No.
But the body is doing many times more. It is supplying oxygen and glucose to 100 trillion cells. Where is 780 crore? Where is 10 lakh crore? You can imagine the dimension, right?
Applying it to the universe.
Yeah. So now what is happening there? It's an atomic process by itself. I will explain you that. Every cell has a membrane for it. That is its boundary wall, its body. So inside the cell there is a gel which is called the cytoplasm. And you have your DNA, you have RNA, you have your mitochondria, you have your lysosome and whatnot. So when it comes to the question of mitochondria has two membrane for itself. That's one organelle which has two membrane for itself, and there is an intermediate space between these two membrane of the mitochondria. Now as the glucose enters your cell, it is C6H12O6. The C6, this glucose is broken into peroxides by the Krebs cycle. So it becomes C6 becomes C3. Here itself almost 2 ATP is born. Then there is a nanotube in which these peroxides are sent into the mitochondria. Mitochondria has a very complicated protein structure, 5 compartments of them. They are called the C1, C2, C3, C4, C5. They are called, the action takes place there. Each compartment has a nanomotor according to the quantum biology, up to 6 to 9,000 RPM. So what they do is they run the peroxide, they run the atoms, only the electrons, through these 5 compartments. Because glucose is a carbohydrate monosaccharide molecule, phosphate is totally a different component. At the end of the mitochondria, it's called the electron transport chain. In technically terms, it's called oxidative force. Cellular respiration is called oxidative phosphorylation. That's why mitochondria is also called the proton pumping machine. So now what it does is it runs all the electrons through these 5 chambers. Technically when you see, it is NADH to NAD, NAD to ADP, ADP to ATP synthase, and ATP one side. On the other side, it is FAD to FADH, then ADP, ATP synthase and ATP. So they produce with one glucose 36 ATP, adenosine triphosphate. This is what is called the high energy currency. This glucose do not drive the cell by itself. Glucose getting converted to ATP, adenosine triphosphate molecule, which is called the high energy currency, to drive the DNA and RNA, which will enable the cells to start functioning. They constantly require their energy currency. We need, when we get hungry, we eat. How you put fuel to your vehicles or to all your electronic and electrical gadgets, you run them through power or battery. So we are in need of glucose, which gets converted to ATP molecule, which is the high energy currency source to run your DNA and RNA, which literally make your cellular function. Now what happens to all the protons which is being removed through this electron transport chain? In quantum biology, if you go and see, Earth is negatively charged. The human body is also negatively charged. The human cells are negatively charged. So the human body, including built with 100 trillion cells, which are all negatively charged, do not want any positive material. In atom, all the electrons are negatively charged, the protons are positively charged. So the protons which are removed by the mitochondrial action to convert peroxides to ATP molecule are carefully blocked and stored in the intermediate space of the membrane of mitochondria. You understand now?
Yes, right.
There are 2 membranes, there's an intermediate space, they go and block it there. They block them there. So now the oxygen is required. The hemoglobin comes and supply oxygen to the human cells, and this oxygen consumes these protons and convert them into water. Okay.
Yeah.
Furthermore, for you to understand, when you run a marathon of 42 kilometers, that is 26 miles, you produce something like 600 to 700 ml of water. So much of energy currency is being produced, so much of glucose has been spent. This is what is exactly called cellular respiration. Technically, it's called oxidative phosphorylation, where oxygen plays a role to make sure that these positively charged protons are converted to water so that free radicals will not be born. This is what it is. This is what is exactly cellular respiration.
Beautiful, sir. So, okay, what is it? What are the factors that really affect cellular respiration? Is it a process that no matter what the condition of the, and I'm speaking about the human body, considering we're talking about, of course, every animal and bacteria, etc., perform cellular respiration, but if you can limit it to the human body, what are the factors that really affect cellular respiration? Is it a is it voluntary in some way where we can affect it through, say, food or water or exercise, breathing? Is it something like that?
Now, like there are many factors. It is too long a time it will take for me to explain that. One of it is also you should understand the human cells individually are supplied with some electricity. These measurements are called millivolts. So constant 20 millivolts of power should come into play for a cellular function. If it is 15, they become lazy. If it is 10, they are functionally dead. If it is 5, they are structurally also dead. Okay? And the amount of dirt, the faulty proteins gets collected inside is one of the major reason for your cellular respiration to go slow. Because proteins are amino acids, sequence of amino acids. These amino acids are produced by the cells. All individual cells in the human body, irrespective of whatever nature of it, different type of cells, produce components required for themselves on their own. They produce the various types of amino acids and then sequence them into the right proportions, in the right order, and produce their own protein. In case while sequencing them they do it wrongly, then they become a faulty protein and the cells reject it. Your lysosome is almost a dustbin which holds all the dirt in your cell. This is one of the reasons. When that load goes more, it's not good for you. One more example is the water retention, the inflammatory accumulation. Unwanted inflammatory accumulation is one of the major reasons which affects cellular respiration. If the glucose is not supplied properly, it is all atomic and subatomic system. You have this protein, the potassium part of metabolism is responsible for supplying glucose to the cells. The insulin uses potassium isotopes to give the signaling system to the human cells, wherein here T3, the thyroxine 3 comes into play. There are a lot of mechanisms involved here. So even any one of the mechanism has to slow down or to fail, then the cellular respiration is affected. Then these cells wherein will not function to expected level to which they should perform.
A question that comes to my mind is the glucose or the energy currency is it's used, as you said, we either expend it for functions or it is stored. Now the storage part of it, which is extra energy or extra glucose that we're not using, and that is it is stored within the body. Does that affect really cellular respiration? And how is it to maintain that balance between the energy needed so that it's not overstored within the body? How do we maintain that balance?
No, we are basically doing this cellular respiration program because we are going to do diabetes next to it, so that it is easier for people to understand what exactly the cell mechanism, the cell biology with oxidative phosphorylation part of it, the mitochondrial action of electron transport chain, which produces ATP molecule. You are talking about glucose. Now huge amount of sugar molecules, glucose, lactose, galactose, maltose and whatnot, lactose and so many things that we consume through our food, which is, grounded into pulp, and then those disaccharide carbohydrates are, broken down to monomers, and then only single molecule will be absorbed in the intestines. Then it is carefully transported through the portal vein to the liver, and the liver scans it and send them out. Now here, when we eat and more of food, and then the enough of glucose is supplied to all parts of the body, the excess glucose is converted to glycogen, and a good amount of it stored in the liver. And also there are large part of the muscular tissues areas in which they store this glycogen. This glucose is converted to linear chain of glucose, 1-4 glycosidic bonding, and they get stored in the muscular tissues. When we are not eating for a longer hours of time, when we are sleeping for longer hours of time, the alpha cells from the pancreas produces glucagon hormone, goes and break down these linear chain of glucose, which is called the glycogen, to single glucose and also phosphate group, and then throw them in the blood, because a lot of cells will be requiring glucose. So that's why always there has to be a minimum sugar level in the bread all the time. It is a minimum 60 to 90 blood sugar level should be there. If we go below 20, then we go into coma. It's called the hypoglycemia. This is a big mechanism which comes under the glucose metabolism. They monitor the whole thing. There are systems and mechanism and sensors inside. They keep monitoring the required glucose level to the blood, the required glucose transport system, and all these things go hand in hand with the signaling systems, which is highly complicated for the scientific community to understand. There are various signaling systems. The signaling system through the potassium metabolism, through the insulin, goes to the human cells, so that the human cell, they open up their membrane to receive glucose inside. Because glucose is a molecule, it cannot travel through the quantum tunneling. It has to find a way. So signaling system to the human cell is to open up the membrane to receive glucose. When inadequate glucose required is received, then there is a sodium molecule which gets discharged, which is the signaling system for the membrane to close. It's biochemistry studies all this so closely, but they could manage to understand only the basics. But then how these signaling systems are generated, how carefully it is being targeted towards each and every individual cell, how they are not dissipating to something else. All these things are very difficult at the moment with modern science for the scientific community to understand. Signaling systems of the human cells is always the intercellular mechanism and so on, is always a challenging task for us, because body is so beautifully designed to subatomic levels.
So I understand that our ancients really understood this process very beautifully. So finally, if you could tell us, how does the ancient Tamil science view cellular respiration? How does it talk about or advise us on that?
Ancients have not, broken their brain too much to understand all these things, in the sense like they must be very clever, they must be very brilliant, because your body, the creation, the evolution is over a span of time, millions of years. They go through a lot of evolutionary change, but the basics remains the same. We are an atomic structure. We are controlled by the 5 major elements. We are the creation of 5 major elements. We are controlled by the 5 major elements. So these things are, fragmentation approach was not there with the ancient people. They must be knowing much more than this, because the way in which they have handled the human science, the way in which they handled the medicinal part of the human science. It's so beautiful that whatever little that I could understand with my experience of 34 years, that these people must be knowing very well of many things, but they are not bothered to go, minute details into it, which is not going to help us, because if there is an electron transport chain is not working in your mitochondria, and we have no way in which we are going to go inside and repair it at all, then what's the point of studying that? So it's a mechanism by itself which functions. The ancients were brilliant enough to make sure that the mechanism goes on with the supportive mechanism what they have developed in the field of medicine. So this is how I look at this whole thing.
I think the approach was more holistic to make sure that you're entirely healthy rather than go into a smaller detail of each function within the cell.
You're right.
Thank you so much, sir. This was, I think, a detailed and a beautiful session on cellular respiration. And I think it's pretty closely associated with the next videos that we're going to talk about, which is diabetes, and which unfortunately a lot of people will identify with me. So in our coming video, we talk in detail about diabetes and understand more about it. Thank you so much, sir.